Jobs have been and will be at the centre of Anthony Albanese's pitch tonight, his first major policy speech of this year. Labor promising to provide greater protection for gig economy workers as part of its sweeping workplace reform proposals. Let's bring in Executive Director of the Australia Institute, Ben Oquist, and David Gazzard, DPG Advisory Director. Gentlemen, thanks both of you for your time. Does this make sense, greater protection for those Uber drivers and so on in the gig economy?
Well, this has been something that's been debated in relation to disruption across a whole range of industries. I think what you have to look at is the fact that a lot of kids are doing these of their own volition because they offer the flexibility they want. They can do them between classes. Now, when they're maybe employed on a more permanent basis, you'd be looking for greater protections for them. No one wants to see those workers ripped off. But it's the same with casual labour. There's workers go into those relationships with their employers because it offers them certain benefits like flexibility. So,
Ben Oquist, your thoughts on this initiative? Because I spoke to Tony Burke earlier and said that, where there are greater requirements and standards and the minimum wage is obviously needs to be in place, but in terms of these payments, people will pay more for those services.
I agree, we're going to have to pay more for those services overall. I thought Tony Burke made a good point that yes, these technologies are good, but shouldn't mean that we have a 19th century industrial relations policy as a result of using 21st century technology. And the reality is laws haven't kept pace with technology. And as we saw from your reports earlier, there's people earning $10 an hour when minimum wage is $20 an hour. And to be thinking that somebody riding as Tony Burke was saying, somebody riding a bicycle, running red lights and trying to keep up with a Google algorithm as an independent contractor is wrong. We need something to protect these effectively low-paid workers now. And I thought it's Albo looking a bit futuristic, some industrial relations laws that keep pace with it. I thought the government's response late today looked a bit over the top. It looked like Christian Porter was sent out, to get a scary line on the 6 p.m. news with his talk of extinction-level event and a $20 billion hit to the economy. I think it's a sensible move from Albo on a policy front. On a political front, it gets him out in front in the new year with something positive to sell just at the time when the government's going to be facing that Senate crunch on industrial relations and be seen to be attacking workers' rights and entitlements. The opposition's out there with a plan to protect them.
I don't think anyone can really seriously argue that it is going to be in the benefit of anyone working to deny casual workers the opportunity to work where the employer is going to be forced to double dip on their entitlements. So for people who've chosen to take casual employment, at the moment, their employer has to retrospectively pay 6 years of leave entitlements that were never due to the employer when they've already got a leave loading. This is in the restaurant trade, across office workers. It's been people who've been helping with aged care and health responses. There is literally no way you can make the case this is not going to have a profound impact on business who are struggling coming out of the back end of a pandemic.
They're saying that it's not Labor's saying it's merely a promise to consult the states. That's what they're saying.
The scheme decision which was upheld in the federal court last year requires all of those employers to retrospectively pay back double entitlements for casual workers. It was originally intended to aim just at the union movement in a bid to get more members of the union, but the impact has been much broader across employers, including restaurants, retail, some of the areas that are struggling the hardest.
People being underpaid, they should get paid for it. And the law...
They're not being underpaid. They have deliberately chosen casual work. It works for them. They're offered the right to convert to full-time work. Most of them, the vast majority, don't want to do that. They want to have the freedom to pursue casual labour. They have already been given a loading to take account of the fact they're casuals. The law, as it currently stands, would force employers to retrospectively pay them for years and years of what the scheme decision determines to be excess loadings. It is really going to damage employers.
I think employers should abide by the law. But just looking a little bit bigger picture for a moment, is that we've had record low wage growth, and wage growth continues to be really low. And yes, there are some businesses struggling, but actually over the past few years, we've seen profits at a record share of GDP. As the RBA Governor has said, the problem is wage growth is too low, not that it's too high. And I think that's where the opposition package works today at a meta level, both for the employee, but for the economy overall, where we need to get wage growth.
We've only got a minute left. I want to get both of your thoughts on the China situation. WHO inquiry today, the former Prime Minister's Department Secretary Martin Parkinson, in terms of the initial call for that inquiry, said, I don't know which kid came up with those points, but what did they think was going to happen? So that's the Parkinson's view on it. Is there a more pragmatic approach this year from the Morrison government via the Trade Minister, Dan Tehan?
I think there is. I think there's renewed calls to, engage with China. It's up to China if they want to take those calls. I think, Australia doesn't want to get caught in a trade war with one of its largest, in fact, its largest trading partner. But there are other important issues around sovereignty. Australia's led the charge for an inquiry into the roots of the pandemic. And, the WHO hasn't managed to come up with anything, but it took the WHO a long time to sort of engage on this in the first place. So,
Alexander Downer, I spoke to him earlier, he says the government was 100% right to do what it did, and some other nation would have made the call if not for Maurice Payne.
This freewheeling, taking off junior talking points, according to Martin Parkinson, has been a trend of the Morrison government, not consulting with DFAT properly before making big announcements. You remember the negative globalism speech was done without DFAT advice. The speech at the UN where he called out China and said it shouldn't have developing nation status, again was done without departmental advice. This looks like the same thing. We need to actually reinvest in serious diplomacy and taking proper considered foreign affairs advice.
Ben, David, great to see you. See you next week.
The bottom 20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
It's no coincidence that we have a wages crisis in Australia.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.